It was a cool, quiet evening by the shores of the Sea of Galilee. The waters gently lapped at the shore, and a warm breeze carried the scent of fresh olive groves from the hills. The setting sun bathed the disciples in a golden light, but despite the beauty of the scene, their hearts were heavy. After weeks of traveling, healing the sick, feeding the hungry, and listening to the cries of the desperate, their spirits were weighed down by the suffering they had witnessed. It was difficult to reconcile the goodness of their mission with the overwhelming darkness they saw in the world. Jesus, noticing the fatigue in their eyes and the worry etched on their faces, gathered them close. He knew that they needed more than rest for their bodies, they needed rest for their souls. "My friends," Jesus said, his voice as gentle as the breeze that stirred the leaves in the trees, "I see the burdens you carry. I see the sadness in your hearts. You have been given much to witness, and the suffering of the world can feel too heavy to bear. But tonight I want to share with you a story, one that will help you understand how to carry joy with you, even in the darkest times." The disciples, eager for any wisdom that could lift the heaviness in their souls, settled around their teacher. The crackling of a small fire and the soft rustling of the reeds were the only sounds as Jesus began his tale. In a small village nestled in the hills of Galilee, there lived two brothers, Jacob and Benjamin. They were born into a family of farmers, and from an early age they learned the ways of the land. Their lives were closely tied to the seasons: the planting in spring, the harvest in summer, and the long, slow winters when they would gather around the hearth with their families. Though the brothers shared the same upbringing, the same fields, and the same family, they could not have been more different in how they viewed the world. Jacob, the elder brother, was a man who found joy in everything. Every morning, as the first light of dawn broke over the hills, Jacob would rise from his bed with a heart full of gratitude. He would step outside, breathe in the cool morning air, and give thanks to God for the new day. He thanked God for the small things: the dew on the grass, the song of the birds, the way the light shimmered on the olive leaves. To Jacob, life was a series of blessings, each moment a gift to be cherished. Even when the harvest was lean, or the rains didn't come when expected, Jacob remained steadfast in his gratitude. He would say to his wife Sarah and his children, "We may not have all we want, but we have all we need. God has blessed us with this life, and we must give thanks every day for what we have." And so Jacob's home was always filled with warmth, love, and laughter. His children grew up knowing the value of gratitude, and even in times of scarcity, there was always joy to be found within their walls. Benjamin, the younger brother, was different. Though he worked just as hard as Jacob, and though his fields were no less fertile, Benjamin could never find contentment. Each day as he worked the soil and tended his crops, his mind was filled with thoughts of what he lacked. If his neighbor's crops were taller, he felt envy. If the weather was too hot, he cursed the sun. If his children fell ill, he lamented the unfairness of life. Benjamin's heart was always focused on what was missing, and so, no matter how much he had, it never felt like enough. His wife, Rachel, was a kind and gentle woman, but even she could not lift the heaviness from Benjamin's heart. Their children, though well-fed and healthy, grew up in a home that lacked the joy and laughter that filled Jacob's house. The weight of Benjamin's constant dissatisfaction hung over them all like a cloud, and even the most beautiful days seemed dim and cold within their walls. The villagers often remarked on the stark contrast between the two brothers. "How is it," they would say, "that Jacob is always so joyful even when times are hard, while Benjamin, who has just as much, is always so unhappy?" The answer, though simple, eluded most. For while Jacob saw the world through the lens of gratitude, Benjamin could only see the world through the lens of scarcity. Where Jacob saw blessings, Benjamin saw only what was lacking. One year, a great drought descended upon the land. 4 months, not a single drop of rain fell from the sky. The fields that had once been green and full of life turned brown and brittle under the relentless sun. The rivers dried up, the wells ran low, and the people of the village began to fear for their very survival. The drought affected everyone. The rich and the poor, the young and the old, no one was spared the hardship. Even Jacob and Benjamin, who had always managed to provide for their families, found themselves struggling to find enough food to eat. Their crops withered in the fields, and the animals grew weak from lack of water. Jacob, though faced with the same hardships as everyone else, remained steadfast in his faith. Every evening he would gather his family around the table, no matter how little food they had, and give thanks to God. "We may not have much," Jacob would say, "but we have each other. We have our health, we have love, and we have the promise of another day. Let us give thanks for these blessings, for they are more than enough." His children, though their bellies often ached with hunger, believed their father's words. They learned to find joy in the little things: the warmth of the fire, the sound of their mother's voice, the beauty of the stars in the night sky. Even in the midst of the drought, their home was a place of peace and love. Benjamin, on the other hand, sank deeper into despair with each passing day. The drought, to him, was a punishment, a cruel twist of fate that had robbed him of everything he had worked so hard to achieve. Each morning he would walk through his withered fields, his heart heavy with bitterness. "Why has God forsaken us?" he would cry out. "What have I done to deserve this suffering?" His anger and frustration spilled over into every aspect of his life. At home, his wife and children grew fearful of his temper, and the once quiet moments of peace they had known became filled with tension and anxiety. Benjamin's heart was closed to gratitude, and in its place, only bitterness and sorrow remained. One evening, after another long hot day of fruitless labor, Benjamin wandered the village in search of food. He had heard rumors that some families had managed to save a few stores of grain, and he was desperate to find something to feed his hungry children. As he walked past Jacob's house, he heard something that stopped him in his tracks: laughter. Through the open window, Benjamin saw Jacob and his family sitting around their modest table, sharing a simple meal of bread and water. The room was filled with the sound of laughter, and the soft glow of the oil lamp cast a warm light over their faces. Despite the drought, despite the scarcity of food, Jacob's family was joyful. They were laughing, talking, and enjoying each other's company as if the world outside their door was not in the grip of a terrible drought. Benjamin stood frozen at the window, a lump forming in his throat. How could Jacob be so joyful when there was so little to be joyful about? How could he laugh when there was so much to fear? As he watched, a deep sense of shame washed over him. He had spent so long focusing on what he lacked that he had forgotten the blessings in his life: his wife, his children, the roof over his head. Unable to bear the weight of his emotions any longer, Benjamin knocked on Jacob's door. Jacob opened it with a wide smile, as if he had been expecting him. "Come in, brother," Jacob said warmly. "You are always welcome here." Benjamin hesitated. "But you have so little," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "How can you be so joyful when there is almost nothing left?" Jacob smiled and placed a hand on his brother's shoulder. "We have much more than you think, Benjamin. We have each other and we have the love of God. Gratitude makes what we have enough." Benjamin stepped inside, and as he sat at the table with Jacob's family, something inside him began to change. The bitterness that had filled his heart for so long began to melt away, replaced by a deep sense of peace. For the first time in years, Benjamin felt the warmth of gratitude fill his heart. As he shared the simple meal with Jacob's family, Benjamin wept, not from sorrow but from relief. He had been blind to the blessings in his life for so long, but now, sitting at his brother's table, he could see clearly. He realized that joy was not found in abundance but in gratitude. It was not about having more but about being thankful for what you had. That night, after leaving Jacob's house, Benjamin returned home with a renewed spirit. He gathered his wife and children around him and spoke to them with a gentleness they hadn't heard in years. "I am sorry," Benjamin said, his voice breaking with emotion. "I have been lost in my anger and sorrow for too long. I forgot to see the blessings that we still have. But no more. From now on, we will give thanks for what we have and trust that God will provide." Rachel, though surprised by her husband's sudden change of heart, felt a weight lift from her own shoulders. She embraced him, and together they sat with their children, offering a prayer of gratitude for the food on their table and the love in their home. Over the coming weeks, as the drought continued, Benjamin began to live his life differently. Each morning he woke with a sense of purpose, giving thanks for the day ahead, no matter what it brought. He learned to appreciate the small things, the laughter of his children, the strength of his wife, the beauty of a sunrise. Slowly but surely, the bitterness that had once consumed him faded, replaced by a deep sense of peace and contentment. Months passed and the drought finally came to an end. One morning, as the villagers gathered for their daily work, they felt the first drops of rain in what seemed like a lifetime. The sky, which had been cloudless and unforgiving for so long, was now dark with storm clouds, and the rain began to fall in earnest, soaking the parched earth. The people of the village rejoiced, running outside to feel the cool water on their skin. The rain brought new life to the land, and soon the fields were green again, and the rivers flowed with fresh, clean water. Jacob and Benjamin stood together in their fields, watching as the rain nourished the soil. Benjamin, with tears in his eyes, turned to his brother and said, "Thank you, Jacob. Thank you for showing me the way back to joy." Jacob smiled, his face lit with the same warmth that had always been there. "It was never far, Benjamin. Gratitude is always within reach, no matter how difficult life may seem. Remember that and you will always find joy." As Jesus finished the story, the disciples sat in silence, their hearts moved by the depth of his words. Many of them had known the bitterness of struggle, just as Benjamin had, and they had felt the weight of despair in their own lives. But now they understood that joy was not something that came from external circumstances, it was something that came from within. Peter, with tears in his eyes, was the first to speak. "Master, how do we live like Jacob? How do we find gratitude when the world seems so full of sorrow?" Jesus looked at Peter with love and said, "Gratitude is a choice, my friend. It is not about denying the pain or the struggles of life. It is about seeing the blessings that still exist, even in the midst of hardship. When you open your heart to gratitude, you open your heart to joy. And in that joy, you will find peace no matter what comes your way." The disciples, deeply moved, nodded in understanding. They knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but they also knew that with gratitude in their hearts, they could face any challenge with joy and strength. As the sun set behind the hills, casting a golden light over the sea, the disciples felt a deep sense of peace. They had been given a great gift, the gift of gratitude, and they knew that it would carry them through whatever trials lay ahead. The power of gratitude transforms even the darkest moments into opportunities for joy. Jesus teaches us that when we focus on the blessings in our lives, no matter how small, we open our hearts to love, peace, and contentment. Gratitude is not about having plenty, it is about seeing the abundance in what we already have. Through this shift in perspective, we can find joy in even the hardest times. In the end, gratitude is not just about what we have, but about how we see the world. It is a practice that leads to a life filled with meaning, peace, and joy, even in the face of hardship. This is end of the story. Please like this video and subscribe this channel for more Jesus story like this. May the God watch over you.